friendship of the land of the brave. Man on a mission, carrying a unique vision, inspiration, hero to the nation. We say, oh my care, well done. We celebrate a God-given gift to the nation.
Good afternoon, fellow Namibians. My name is Daisry Obal. You're tuned into NBC, where we continue to commemorate the life and legacy of the late Dr. Geingob, the former president who passed away in the Namibian capital this past Sunday, the 4th of February 2024. And joining us this afternoon is sign language interpreter for this portion, Selma Moses. Now, we do know that President Cyril Ramaphosa from neighboring South Africa arrived in the Namibian capital earlier today, where he paid a courtesy call on President Nangolo Mbumba at State House, and thereafter he is scheduled to visit Casa Rosalia to convey his condolences to Madam Monica Geingob, widow of the late President Geingob. Now, we continue our discussions here on NBC, and joining me this afternoon is the presidential advisor responsible for youth matters and enterprise development, none other than Madam Daisry Obal, to tell us about her experience working alongside the late President Geingob. Good afternoon, Madam, and welcome.
Afternoon, Denver.
Thank you very much for making time for us during what is a very difficult time, also for you, but certainly also for the nation. My sincere condolences to you.
Thank you. Thank you to us all.
Thank you. When the devastating news broke this past Sunday, where were you when you received the news, and what were the prevailing circumstances at the time?
We're all aware that it was a midnight incident, and most of us were at home. But before His Excellency left the country to receive medical treatment, as staff in his private office, he had actually called us to go and spend some time with him at his residence the day before he traveled, actually. And I'm very grateful we had that opportunity to sit down with him one last time. Characteristically, he gave us a very transparent brief on the developments and what he was experiencing. And I guess now in hindsight, you can see that he was also preparing us and wishing us well.
Did it occur to you during that last engagement that it could be the last?
Not at all. We had hope. President was a very strong man, and he exuded a lot of strength, even in those circumstances, and that gave us courage to believe that he could fight through.
And yet, the tragedy hit in the end.
And the tragedy hit in the end when that midnight call came in.
And how have you been holding up ever since?
I must admit that I think we are all still processing the rapid events of the past 3 weeks.
It'll be a week tomorrow. It does feel so much longer.
It feels much, much longer. It's the weight of the news and just the weight of the impact on the nation and on us individually. I'm still processing, Denver.
Could you walk us through some of the anecdotes, some of the experiences, some of the highlights, some of the cherished moments that you had alongside and in the presence of what certainly was a global icon?
It's been a walk down memory path the past few days as I tried to crystallize the last 9 years. President appointed me on the 29th of June 2015. I was 28 years old and certainly among his youngest staff members. And so the journey started where we walked side by side with him in the discharge of his constitutional mandate, and nothing could have prepared me for the tremendous journey and the great lessons that we would imbibe from such a towering, decorated figure. And I think the greatest privilege must be not only working with President as a leader, but also working with the late Hage Geingob as a person and understanding the person in the position and providing that support for him to be all that he needed to be to the nation that looked up to him. It is an experience I will always remain grateful for. President was a hard taskmaster. He consistently upheld himself to a standard of excellence, and he expected no less from his team members. He was a teacher, so being young around him was always a master class. Even as we prepared statements and documents, he was very thorough, very detailed. No mistake could evade him. What I really appreciated about President was that he saw people. He was able to get the value and see the value in every single member of his team. If there was a meeting and he hadn't sufficiently heard from the young voices, he would call on me at the end and say, "Youth, what do you think? Say something." Very, very inclusive. The diversity around his table was evident. He wanted his office to reflect the diversity of the Namibian House. And we had so many different tribes and ethnic groups, faiths and religions represented around his table, because I think that is the hallmark of Geingob's leadership and legacy. He was very kind. Small things. I used to be the one that would read back his statements to him. So lengthy statements like the State of the Nation address, sometimes you come under pressure just because of the time and the importance of the occasion. And I think one day he could see that my voice was cracking and I was struggling a little bit under the pressure. And President poured a glass of water and he got up from his chair and he walked across to me and served me a glass of water with the most kind smile. A really caring leader, but also a father figure. So there was correction, there was guidance, there was protection sometimes because of the political nature of the office, and a lot of tutelage. Really privileged. Yeah.
We've seen a number of global leaders pay homage to the late
Yes.
Geingob. And as shared with our viewers earlier, President Cyril Ramaphosa arrived in the country earlier today.
Yeah.
Would you like to perhaps touch on the relationship between Namibia and South Africa, between the late Dr. Geingob and President Ramaphosa, against the backdrop also of young people and enterprise development?
I think they had a very unique friendship. It was less formal. Even though they were colleagues, they had a direct line to each other. They were very supportive of each other. I think our two nations experienced similar socioeconomic challenges, and they were really able to provide a lot of guidance. President being among the senior leaders in the region, I think a lot of his colleagues in the region looked up to him in that manner. They consulted him and they engaged him frequently on the political security matters affecting the region. President was also politically very involved in the ANC, and we saw in recent months that he was traveling to South Africa to provide some lectures on political ideology and solidarity. And even up until January, Namibia gave a very strong statement in support of South Africa's contestation at the International Criminal Court of Justice, which shows you the shared values and the solidarity between the two nations and the leaders. Yeah.
You earlier described the late Dr. Geingob as a towering, decorated figure, and I think many would concur with those sentiments. And perhaps part of the shock also is that one would think that such a towering, decorated figure would be immortal.
Yes.
So it's certainly not the kind of stature, the kind of figure one would associate with something as seemingly finite as death.
Yes. We've had the privileged opportunity to support President in his democratic contestations. So in 2017, there was the intra-party contestation. 2019, there was the national presidential elections, which he had to actively campaign for. And even though he always had such a strong mandate, which young people contributed significantly to, he also had a very strong pedigree that spoke and made him stand out heads and shoulders above his peers. And yes, our heroes do not die, but there is a scripture that has provided me some comfort that says that when David had served his generation according to the purposes of God, that is when he went to lay down and slept with his ancestors. And I think it is about times and seasons, the leader that we needed at that moment that we were in. I am beginning to understand that President's role was really to navigate our countries through protracted periods of crisis, multidimensional crises, economic, public health emergencies, environmental. But at the end, I believe that he has also poised us and in proverbial terms, delivered us to what would be a more prosperous future, even though he himself may not be around to see us enter that promised land.
But the way has been paved.
The way has certainly been paved.
And the bar has been set very high.
Extremely high for the next generation.
In your introductory overview, you shared with us that you were still in your 20s, 9 years ago, when he handpicked you for this very important national task. And the president is also renowned for having had such a fine eye to scout talent. And we also learned from a number of people, a number of those human beings whom he deemed to have been talent, that you don't say no to him. And of course, it also speaks to a calling to serve one's nation. How was your experience when he reached out to you for this task, and coupled with the responsibility, but certainly also the honor to serve Namibia and her people?
These are jobs that you don't apply for Denver. I remember it was an ordinary Sunday afternoon when my phone rang and everything changed. And the President said, get ready for announcement. And President was very visionary. He had a lot of foresight. And even the creation of this task, this desk in the private office was an innovation that has now become a governance best practice. Different governments across the continent have started to model President Geingob's inclusive model of bringing more young people to the decision-making table. When I entered government, I was alone, with the exception of Mandela Kapere in terms of youth leaders in politics. But I think 9 years down the line, the results speak for themselves. If we look at our parliament, for the first time since our independence, we have a youthful representation. We have at least 6 MPs that are born frees, who were born after independence, which is unprecedented. If you look at our public enterprises and just the management of our economic assets, we have a lot of young professionals who are serving within the private and business sector on boards, not to mention the demographic transition that he has really championed politically through the appointment of governors at subnational, central government, policy makers. We saw the history yesterday that is being continued, and that is because of the intent. But this did not just start when President was president. If we take it back to when he was director of the United Nations Institute, he was always surrounded by young people. He was always developing talent and nurturing talent. When he was prime minister, we listened to a few interviews and testimonies being given on television. Many prominent figures and leaders in our society today have passed through the hand of President Geingob. And it speaks to his character, a strong and fearless character that is able to surround himself with strong leaders.
And who showed up with consistent authenticity, was always himself. Now, the presidency hosted a very moving, very emotional service on Thursday, a very beautiful service. And we also heard testimonies from the team about what it was like to experience him in the office. We heard that he would knock on your door and come check up on how you're doing, what it is that you're busy with, check on the progress. Could you perhaps give us a bit of insight into what a day looked like at the presidency with Hage Geingob at the helm of the affairs?
President was new school, but still old school. So old school in the sense that he still expected you to be behind your desk and answer the landline if he called you. If there was a meeting, he would want the diversity of the views on the subject matter that is being discussed. And he was always ready with follow-up questions to try to understand why certain tasks were not moving at the pace that they were supposed to. So he required absolute preparedness. President led from a very high ethical point of view. He did not tolerate lies. So the standard in terms of ethical personal leadership was also very high in the office. We were self-managing to be above reproach, but because of the standard that was set by our leader as well, very intolerant to petty gossip or very fair. One of the values and experiences I appreciate the most about the president was that he would be a fair arbitrator. He brokered many difficult conversations, Denver, and demonstrated a lot of courage in doing so. Things that were difficult for leaders to engage, whether it was the National Land Conference, whether it was genocide and reparations, or the Swapo dungeon survivors, all of these firsts came under his presidency, where he created the space to hear. But like you rightly say, he would also just randomly leave his private office and walk across to have tea in your office, and you would hear his voice and smell his perfume a few meters away as he approached your office, and he would sit down and he would talk to you, sometimes not always work, sometimes following up on assignments. He also empowered his advisors, so he gave us diverse roles beyond just being a youth and enterprise development advisor. He would also give us political assignments and social assignments as a testament to his delegation of responsibility and authority. There was a moment I'll never forget when we were preparing for the Second Land Conference, and that was in October 2018 or 19, if I'm not mistaken. It was October, and he had just concluded his attendance of the statutory meetings at the United Nations General Assembly, and the timelines were tight, returning back into the country to open what was a very important policy conference. And we landed at Hosea Kutako, jumped straight into our vehicles, drove straight to his private residence, Casa Rosalia. He set up an office there because the land conference was the very next morning. And he stayed with his team, perfecting his keynote, his opening statement, and he sunrised.
Wow.
He didn't sleep one wink
until
he was satisfied with the quality of the statement. That is how important matters of national importance were to him. Very sacrificial and very hands-on and very, very dedicated to getting the job done.
Obed Kanjode, Director General of the National Planning Commission, also shared with us Thursday evening that when his own brother got bludgeoned to death, the president really showed up as a real father figure for him. And it's something that you also referred to earlier, what a father figure he was, and how he also showed a keen interest in the well-being of the loved ones, of those who served alongside him. Would you like to talk to us a bit about that, please?
Yes, one of the last conversations that we were having this December had also to do with personal circumstances in my own life, because my family, we lost my uncle, and President was concerned about that incident, and as I wished him a Merry Christmas, he also responded to condole us on the loss. So President was always involved, and he always cared. Yeah.
And let's not forget a man with an incredible sense of humor, even when times were very tough.
Yeah.
At the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, how he held space for the country,
Yeah.
but also with so much humor at the same time, breaking very difficult moments.
Yeah. I was among the president's team. I was the COVID advisor, not COVID advisor, but I was the lead on COVID, which would mean that I sat on the task forces that were doing the policy recommendations, and also took the lead in drafting all 43 COVID statements by the president during the crisis. And the one thing that I will always appreciate was the humanity, the tone with which President spoke to the nation during that time of deep pain and uncertainty. He was so human. And in his humanity, he also understood the antidotal nature of laughter and humor. So when young people would, take a spin on some of his directives, whether it was the alcohol issues or, the prohibitions,
He would come back to the next briefing and make reference to it.
He would make reference to it. We would send him the videos on WhatsApp, and he actually enjoyed it. I think he didn't take himself too seriously. which was a good thing because it also allowed us to just breathe, because the intensity of the work and the intensity of the office, it can be all-consuming. So the laughter and the humor was a coping mechanism, and we really, really enjoyed that about him. We were going to miss him so much. Yeah.
Let's have a look at some of the policy initiatives
Yeah.
that were born during your tenure alongside President Geingob.
Wow. I think youth issues, youth development, youth empowerment have been effectively mainstreamed into government policy and development programs. There isn't a sector that can design a program today without reflecting on the representation or inclusion or benefit of young people. That is thanks to the championship and the emphasis that has consistently been placed by President Geingob. The two impact plans, the Harambee 1 and Harambee 2, mainstreamed youth issues across issues of effective governance, issues of economic advancement, issues of social progress and infrastructure development, were intended to resolve the concerns of young people as well. I think more specifically what I can see as, what I can pick, not to sound too generic, if I reflect from a public procurement point of view, President was very strong on leveraging the procurement muscle of the state, because the government makes up 65% of this economy, to say we must leverage and use our procurement as a catalyst for our SMEs. And so the Public Procurement Act and the subsequent Code of Conduct had strong preference clause on young people, indigenous, youth-owned businesses, SMEs, women, all the demographics that were needed to drive empowerment. Even the Equitable Economic Empowerment Bill, even though it did not see the light of day, that was predominantly going to benefit a young population, because President's emphasis was cascading economic participation. He wanted mass ownership, mass management of productive economic assets. He wanted more young people to be able to manage, to own, and to benefit from enterprise development programs. From a social point of view, President Geingob's administration intensified a lot of spending into the TVET sector. Before 2014, TVET was lagging behind in terms of capacity, in terms of quality, and there was a deliberate policy thrust to increase the capacity and the quality and the output of the TVET sector. And I think those results are speaking for themselves. And we know that the TVET sector is one of the sectors that produces most entrepreneurs and those who are able to create opportunities for themselves. From an education point of view, we've seen ECD becoming a policy priority under HPP2, which also was left behind, because of competing priorities. And ECD is so foundational to the health and the growth of society over the long term. There were a lot of initiatives, Denver, but I think suffice to say that through the National Youth Policy, through revisions on the Sport Act, which highlighted priority codes, introduced incentives and rewards, these were all targeted and individual impacts that are making the collective difference today. Yeah.
Intermittently, we'll also be showing you visuals. President Cyril Ramaphosa is at Casa Rosalia. He's also signing the Book of Condolences at present. At some stage, we'll also cross over to Colic Blanche Correces to bring us an update of what is transpiring there. Daisry, I remember the President at more than one occasion expressing concern about not leaving the youth behind and how important it is for us to be cognizant not only of the role that they are able to play, but certainly also how they may have been excluded previously. And if we continue that, we could see unrest, which will not be good for this country. Talk to us about the challenges that have been dealt with, the crises that were averted, but certainly also those that still persist and that we need to deal with as we build and capacitate his legacy.
The President has made many references, sometimes reflectively in his office, looking at that coat of arms. And there was a day where he looked at unity and he said, unity, we're doing okay. Liberty, we're doing okay. But justice is where the work needs to be done. And I think justice also includes socioeconomic justice. when President, referred to youth empowerment, it wasn't just political rhetoric because of the demographic profile of the country. It was really about a moral imperative. He understood that this is a sustainable development issue, and if we fail to prepare young people to become custodians of our architecture, whether socio-economic or governance, we would be losing the gains that we are making today. So that investment for him was almost a guarantor of our democracy, a guarantor of all the investments that we have made to this point.
What responsibility do we as young people have to also play our part? I think there are times that we may forget that it's a dual responsibility. Yes, the policy and legislative framework could be implemented, but how is it that we take up the opportunities that exist? How is it that we strengthen the arms of government?
I think President, looking at us last week, would have been very proud of the nation. I think there's a high level of citizen compliance and goodwill, which, that is the contribution of the Namibian citizen. I think we passed a big litmus test with last week's political transition, as we witnessed process, systems and institutions take effect, and that is the architecture that he has bequeathed to us. So as his legacy, I think we are duty bound to see through a functional constitutional democracy, to uphold democratic processes, to uphold democratic institutions. That means a number of things. That means putting skin in the game to do the work of nation building, whether that includes economic development, but that also means participating in democratic processes, whether electing or holding an elected leader accountable. That is part of the meaningful role that young people still have to play. I think the greatest gift that the president has left for us is hope. He couldn't finish the work that he started, but he has now set us in a direction where there is promise for a better tomorrow, where there are budding new industries and emerging sectors that can create the opportunities for young people to be involved in the building of the economy, whether oil and gas or whether green industrialization, and even other sectors.
We've heard it a lot the last couple of days, and you also mentioned it earlier, his role as a mentor. How important was mentoring for him, and what is it that we learned as mentees that we now need to transfer in terms of skills to future mentees?
Yeah, President was a mentor in the fact that he took his role as a leader. He was very intentional in transferring wisdom. He was very deliberate in inculcating the ideas and the ideals that can transform Namibia. He was very consistent in repeating the principles that he believed could uphold the democracy. So there are things that, you close your eyes and it's a poem, whether it's the Namibian house and the multicolored bricks that are painted in one color, which is the flag, his emphasis on nationalism above tribalism, his emphasis on accountability and transparency for institutions to build public citizen trust, which I hope will be permanently entrenched in our governance architecture, whether it is his approach on engagement and institutionalizing dialogue, his principle of inclusion, whether that is now political. We saw him appointing presidents of other political leaders into his government to demonstrate the pluralism of our democracy, demographic representation, gender representation. He has been the architect and he has facilitated a political path that might usher in the next demographic transition of a female president. These are the ideas and the ideals that we must now defend and hold sacred as we continue without him.
He, without a doubt, had a lot of energy for someone of his level of responsibility, but also his advanced age. You just spoke about how he was able to sunrise in pursuit of serving this nation, but we also saw him getting out of his vehicle dancing, engaging school children with a dance en route to his vehicle. Where do you think that energy came from?
I think that is the man, that is Geingob the man. A lover of life. He loved to live. He valued life and he loved his people. I also think that President drew a lot of energy from those who surrounded him. I think that he was a sanguine in that respect, because when he entered a room, he reverberated the energy that he was receiving, and he reciprocated it as well. Age is just a number. He would always say that, look, youth is a mindset.
So we also know, and you've also touched on it, his support of emerging new industries. And part of it includes, of course, technology. Part of it includes innovation. Connecting that with youth development and enterprise development, what would you say was his role in that regard?
President charted a lot of new waters, new frontiers. In 2021, he commissioned a 4IR task force just to understand the impact of the different technologies on our industries and the opportunities. In his last State of the Nation, he was directing the financial sector through the central bank to enable young people to participate in online transactions, to open the gateways and to make it possible for us to leverage e-services, e-procurement, e-retail. Because he understood that that is the space where the creative economy is, that is where young people can earn a livelihood through creative arts. And because of the size of the Namibian economy, he really wanted us to be poised to participate in the broader continental markets through trade and import and trade. So he trusted his advisors a lot. Green hydrogen was a foreign concept at its inception stage, but because he's an intellectual, because he's well-read, he also quickly understood that this was the right leadership decision to take to secure tomorrow. And Namibia is poised now, providing leadership not only in the region but on the continent, if not globally, on some of these new frontiers.
As we're slowly starting to wrap up our conversation this afternoon, I would like us to connect the dots a bit more and even further and perhaps deeper. What impact did Geingob have on the life of Daisry Obal? How different do you think your life would have been had you not had the influence of this man in your life?
Very fortunate, because I think he has changed everything. The Apostle Paul became a very influential leader in his society at the time. He was well educated, and he credited his good education to his rabbi, his teacher Gamaliel. He'd often say, I learned at the feet of Gamaliel. And that has been my experience. Over the past 8.5 years, I sat at the feet of Geingob, and under his tutelage, he has taught me everything that I know, Denver. I'm now a student of law, but I realized that I was doing law through the lectures of Geingob. I understand constitutionalism, democracy, diplomacy, governance, public policy, leadership, administration. It is all through his hand and at his table that I've been able to imbibe so much knowledge and understanding, perspective, context, and knowledge.
What will you miss most about him?
I will miss his laughter.
And a message for fellow Namibians, young people who may not have the capacity to process what it is that's been happening the past couple of days, but at the same time hold on to a hope that might feel evasive right now, that yet the way has been paved, the bar has been set high, and there is indeed hope. And blessed are those who mourn, because they shall be consoled.
Yes, I think we should celebrate the lifetime contribution of H.G. Geingob. We're very privileged to have experienced such a personality during our time. I also think we should be encouraged with the hope that he has left us, because hope is a powerful gift to give, and that hope should inspire all of us to work hard to realize the vision of a united, inclusive, prosperous Namibian house.
What is it that we need to do starting today to continue this legacy? And we do know that a lot still needs to happen over the next 2 weeks before the burial on the 24th. But we do know that he would have wanted us to not stop the momentum, irrespective of how shattered we are, irrespective of how broken our hearts are.
At a personal level, Denver, it is as simple as sharing. The call to not leave anyone behind is a call for you actually to look left and right within your own relational constellations, within your community, and say, who's at risk of being left behind? And what can I do as a compatriot to take them along?
Madam Obal, we appreciate your time. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
Only to comfort the nation.
Thank you so much for your time, and our condolences once again. And thank you for
you.
what you continue to do for young people in this country.
Thank you for having me.
That was Madame Daisry Obal. She was President Geingob's special advisor responsible specifically for youth development and enterprise development.
Land of the brave, in spite of the pain, let's celebrate a legendary father. We're